All right, there we go.
Well, let's see. Well, you guys are all wearing head coverings, I see, but two of us aren't. So,
That's right. Two of us are scriptural, and our prayers will be heard. But
yeah, I guess your prayers are just useless.
yeah, everybody else has something blocking the way.
How's
I'm
that for
maintaining the
controversy?
standard.
That's good stuff.
All right, let me see.
You
Starting
know, I don't
17.
need hair for a prayer to be useless.
You
One more
want-
time, Tom. Say it again.
I said I don't need hair for a prayer to be useless.
Hey, did Brittany get moved?
Well, that's a great question. We actually are we're debating that up here in the Pacific Northwest because it looks like he might be there now, although he had said he wasn't going to be there till September. So
Based on his Facebook post.
sounds like he's there. Yeah,
Yeah.
Salem's about an hour south of us, a little more than that. So I don't communicate much down there. So
Is that where they had the witch trials, or is that another state?
different Salem, but same
Different.
name. Yeah,
Salem, Massachusetts, I believe.
there's probably a Salem in every state. I would guess.
There's a Salem, Indiana, and a Salem, Illinois.
Yeah,
And there's also
Yeah,
a
Salem.
Jerusalem.
Jeru Salem. Yeah, Salem is our capital.
Really? Well, that's something my kids learned that I forgot. All right, let's see. Let me mute my phone. Caleb and I were discussing the potentials of AI in regards to studying and various things. I wonder if anyone has taken, what's his name? Who did the executable sermon outlines?
Copeland,
Mark-
Mark Copeland.
Mark Copeland.
I wonder if he's ever
Copeland,
plugged
yeah.
his info, his material into an AI to learn from as far as to answer questions and stuff.
That's interesting, right? Right. By the way, I need to correct you all in your errors. I just looked it up, and there is no Salem, California.
What? Well, maybe it's not a real state.
What?
That's another debate.
We took a vote.
Hey, you know what? You know the problem with that, Brian? If you want to say California is not a real state, they're going to keep going north, and they're going to get Washington and Oregon also.
Oh yeah, yeah. We're California Junior. There's no question about that. We are definitely California Junior.
Actually, I think we're trying to outdo you sometimes.
Yeah, no, we're California's younger, wilder brother. That would be maybe the.
Yeah, that would be the way to describe that stuff. But you got a lot more beautiful stuff. Well, I guess I can't say. California has a lot of beautiful places to go. It's just you got to get away from the people to see them.
All right, let's see. Here in a
There's
minute.
a USS Salem. Oh, sorry.
Was that a ship? Obviously, it's a ship, I guess.
Yeah. I typed in Salem, and the closest thing it gave us was Selma.
There's no Salem, California. That's interesting. Yeah, I thought that there'd be a Salem every state.
Well, we purged ourselves of all the witches
Yeah, that's
a
true.
long time ago. So
All right, this concludes our portion of the TFG, Truth Factor Geography. Here in a minute. Well, sometimes we do the TFW, Truth Factor Weather section. What else do we talk about that's non? We do different things. Okay. Let's see. Let's go ahead and we're going to continue here in just a moment with John chapter 17. I think Bob won't be able to make it today, and Brendan's more than likely preoccupied as well. So let's see. All right, let's go ahead and fade out, and we'll be right back. Greetings, I'm John Duvall. Welcome back to another Truth Factor discussion. We'd like to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for this Bible study. Here in just a moment, we will continue in the Gospel of John, chapter 17, right about verse 1. This has been a very interesting study. we always enjoy looking at the Gospels, but John really focuses a lot upon the deity of Christ, the authority behind his teachings, the miracles that he did. And so it's been very beneficial. And really, when you look at the end of John, he says these things are written so that you may believe. And the Gospel of John does a very good job of that. Let's go ahead and bring everyone into the study. Gentlemen, how's everyone doing today? All right. We have
I'm okay.
most of us with us, so most is here. Bob's not, and Brendan's not. I feel like I'm missing someone else, but that's the normal group. And then we have Caleb, of course, but you know. Caleb, if you're interested, I didn't think about bringing this up before, but I can create an email address where it's caleb@truthfactor.com. That'll just forward to whatever you would prefer. And that way I can put you on this handy dandy email contact list that I have up on the screen now, and you won't feel left out. If you have any questions for us, send them to questions@truthfactorlive.com, or you can email us individually as you see on the screen there, John at Paul at etc. truthfactor.com.
I don't know. Right now, I can say whatever I want. Nobody can comment back.
You know, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah. Hey, we'll throw you under the bus. Don't worry. We'll do that for sure.
Forward them all to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, never mind. The order of the blocks, I think, changed a little bit and threw me off. Let's see who's joined us so far online. We have David Clark and Marcia Patterson's with us. Jerry Wilcox is with us also. Chris Kramer and Jimmy Kersey. And there may be others. If this is your first time of joining us for our live study, you can comment on the study. If you have a thought you'd like to share with us or maybe a question, we'd love to hear from you. You can comment on the Facebook side of the world in the comment section of this live video, or if you're watching this on YouTube, then use the chat area for that live stream there. On the website, truthfactor.com, we do have a way you can watch the live stream there, but it doesn't make for an easy way of communicating with us unless you do email. And that's, again, questions@truthfactorlive.com. All right. So let's see. Starting in John chapter 17, any thoughts or comments on what we're looking at leading up to this point in this next section? Anything additional? Okay. Brian, I think you made the comment last week, that you would rather call John 17 the Lord's Prayer. And, no, it wasn't you? Who was that? Tom did, sorry. That's it, yeah. Tom did it. Tom made the point that he likes to call John 17 the Lord's Prayer, and what Jesus teaches his apostles is more of not so much a model, but a way of praying so they would understand better about prayer. And that's a very interesting point. We know Jesus prayed many times, but this is one of the few actual records of his prayer.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And the whole point of that is Matthew 6. It's a model. It's not Jesus actually praying. It's Jesus saying this is how to pray.
Yeah.
And of course we know how that model prayer is used. I mean it's just blindly quoted or quoted by rote, and that's not saying it can't be serious, but in many instances it's just quoted without thought.
How
But
would
try
we know?
memorizing John 17.
Yeah. Well, if you've memorized John 17, good for you.
Years ago, I was at a hospital visiting a member, and their family was there, and not all their families were members of the church. And I went through a phase where I would try to begin my prayers with, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name," kind of following that pattern. You don't do that in that setting, because as soon as I started it, everybody jumped in and continued reciting the prayer. But now here's the question, we're studying prayer in the Sunday morning Bible class that I teach. And we're talking, the differences between the two prayers. I was kind of sharing with them what Tom had mentioned about it. How would we know that the prayer that Jesus taught his apostles to pray is a prayer that he himself would not have prayed, as to a point?
Oh, I think I think the fact that he used it as a model means he could have prayed it. I mean,
I don't think he
I
could
mean,
have.
it would have been his it would have been the qualities of. I
Is it the
see
forgiveness
saying
of
from the
sin?
standpoint of forgive us
Yeah.
of our sins. I
Yeah.
see the point you're making there. That's a good point, John. I hadn't thought about it from that standpoint. But obviously, I think he was teaching them to pray in relation to the way that he did pray.
But see, I think that makes your point even more so. That he
Yeah.
was teaching them how to pray, and in their praying, they would need to pray to the Father, asking him to forgive them of their sins. Whereas Jesus himself would have never
Did
made
not.
that request because he had no sins.
Exactly.
It's interesting thought. All right, let's see. What do you think about that? I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to drop us a comment or a thought. Let's go ahead and continue with our study starting in John chapter 17. And Mr. Paul, would you mind reading the first 5 verses for us, sir?
Sure. John 18, 1-5.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, did we finish John 17 verse 22? I thought we were supposed to start like in verse 23, but I could be wrong on that.
Well, hold on a minute here. Let's see. What did I put down?
You put down John 17, 22 or 23.
Did I do that?
Yeah. I mean, if we finished it last week, that's fine. I'm just clarifying.
Okay.
I wasn't here last week, so
Bear with me a second. You're right. I did put down 22. I don't know what I was thinking.
I bear no responsibility for any mistakes. I wasn't here. So
that's right.
All right. So
We just fall apart when Paul and Brian aren't here. I mean, I guess the bald heads.
Oh, because we talked about sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. We looked at all that last week.
Yes, we
Okay,
did.
my apologies. It is verse 22, and I think Caleb, you mentioned that earlier. I think,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking you're kind of the new guy, so you don't know what you're talking about. And sorry about that.
he's our Elihu. He's waiting for us to get all of our nonsense out before he clears things up and fixes it for us.
Yeah.
For those
John's
who
the
may
one
not be
running the
aware,
show. He
that's
doesn't know what he's
Job's
talking
friend who knew what he was talking about.
But he said, "I'm younger than you guys, so I'll wait till you're done jib-jabbing, and then I'll." That's the. I guess that's the good word translation. But
I like
should make Tom
the
feel
jib
really
jab. Yep.
Jib jab, yeah.
In the meantime, getting back to the text.
Yeah. So
Isn't there
Paul,
a
like I was
translation
saying,
like the word on the street or something?
would you read verses 20 through 26, and that'll get us back to the section.
20 or 22?
Let's start at 20, just kind of contextually, I think. Yeah, my bad about
Yeah.
that. Sorry, guys.
Be
Go
happy to do that. And so we'll complete John chapter 17 with the reading of John 17, 20 through 26. And what translation do you have up there, John?
I've got the New King James currently.
Let me just click over there. Sorry. All right. I do not pray for these alone, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, that they all may be one as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that you sent me. And the glory which you gave me, I have given them, that they may be one, just as we are one, I and them, and you and me, that they may be made perfect in one, and that the world may know that you have sent me, and have loved them as you have loved me. Father, I desire that they also whom you gave me may be with me where I am, that they may behold my glory, which you have given me. For you loved me before the foundation of the world. O righteous Father, the world has not known you, but I have known you, that these have known that you sent me. And I have declared to them your name, and will declare it, that the love with which you loved me may be in them, and I in them.
All righty. Thank you, Paul.
Certainly.
All right. So coming back into verse 22 there, he talks about the glory which you gave me, I have given them, that they may be one just as we are one. This sounds a lot like the term what John discusses in 1 John 1 in regards to the fellowship. That uses that term there, but here it's basically that same idea, or could there be more to it?
I think you're exactly right, John, that the word fellowship, while not used specifically in this passage, is throughout this passage. And so we see that idea of those who come to believe through the word that was preached, shared together in the Father and in the Son. And, that's the concept of fellowship. And Jesus desires that we have such fellowship with him through this life that we can have that in eternity as well, and share with him in that we might be where he is. When I read this, I can just feel the emotion of how much Jesus cared for his disciples, those who walked with him as he walked on this earth, and the concern that he had for them, how he wanted them to be safe, and he wanted them to be saved, and as well as do the work that was given them. But I think you see that just very, very obviously in the context here, that Jesus wants his Father's will to be done. He wants to complete what he's come to do, and he definitely wants the work of the apostles to continue, but for them to be safe and saved and to be cared for and to know that God loves them.
That's a good point. Good point. Tom, what's your thought?
Yeah, I appreciate the emphasis on the word fellowship in this text, but let's not forget what causes that fellowship. It's unity. And one of the points that we drive home is, we talked a little bit about it last week in the verse 1 or 21, that they may be one as you, Father, are in me. That's the degree of unity we are to strive to have. And Jesus knows that unity is going to exist between him and the righteous apostles. There is the fellowship, but the reason there's the fellowship is there's the agreement. And we need to use that as our standard for unity among ourselves. So many people today in the religious world teach unity in diversity, and what they mean by that is unity in doctrinal diversity. That we can just agree to disagree on doctrine. Doctrine's not important. Except for depending on who you talk to, they may factor in some key elements that we do have to agree on. And as long as we agree on these, then all the other stuff is minutia and is unimportant. But that's not what Jesus is emphasizing. He's emphasizing complete and total unity. And he knows that these men that he's taught, that's what they're going to teach. And there is complete agreement with him and with God.
Well, Tom, I think that's a good point, especially, and we looked at this some last week, but when we go back up into verse, 21, he says that they all may be one, as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that you sent me. And so we may have unity amongst ourselves, but not be in fellowship with God. Going back to what you're saying there, that the unity has got to be first established within being in fellowship with Christ, in fellowship with God, being in them, they being in us, and then therefore we have the proper fellowship with one another.
Yeah, exactly. And I appreciate how he uses the word glory there. The glory which you gave me, I have given them. That isn't that how God is glorified? I think Jesus was the one that said that in this very lesson.
Yeah.
By this the Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit. Or he says that God is glorified by our being unified, by our love for one another.
Speaking of unity and fellowship, Paul had to step away, and Brian had to step away as well. But Brian had warned us he might have to leave a little bit earlier there. Caleb, let me kind of just one further thought on this, and we'll see if you've got any thoughts as well. I find it interesting. Switch back to that view there. I find it interesting the number of times that John uses the idea of abiding in. Not just within, like in this section here, but even in 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, there's several times that he talks about if his word abides within us, then we abide within him and he in us. It's just a very powerful imagery of showing that Christ is in God, God is in Christ, we are in Christ, we are in God, we are in the Spirit is in us, God is in us, Christ is in us. It's just a very beautiful picture to what Tom was talking about, to the unity that we have there. You got any thoughts on that, Caleb?
Yeah, well, I was reading first, Ephesians 4. I think that's a good reference when you go to like Ephesians 4, 3-6, when it tells us the being diligent to preserve the unity of the Spirit in the body of peace. There's one body, one Spirit, just as also there are called in one hope you're calling. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father. All who are over and all through and in all. We're all, it's all about the unity there. We're called to unity.
Yeah.
I think that it's easy to go, we get upset about different things and we split. We drive each other apart. But God wants us to be united in his word and united in spirit, united in purpose through Christ. And Jesus' last, I think Tom made a good point, I think Paul did. The emotion that's going into this is like the last thing. It's the very last thing Jesus gets to say before he's betrayed. This is the last teaching he's going to be able to give them, that, hey, be united, stay together. Because me and God are one, and he wants his people to be one.
It's a little bit off subject. I'm going to take us off subject for a minute, and then we'll go back to Jerry's got a comment that we'll bring back in, going back to the discussion a little bit with the prayer in Matthew chapter 6. But when you look at when you look at the 7 churches of Asia, 5 of them had problems, clearly. And some, if we were to rate the problems, some might have been worse than others. But of course, God didn't do that. But in all 5 situations, he put the responsibility to solve the problem on both those who were guilty as well as those who were not guilty. He didn't tell those who had not yet stained their garments to leave the group and go start their own group and leave those filthy, wicked people behind. He put the responsibility upon the whole of the church to solve the problems, to fix the problems, so the candlestick is not removed. Now, generally speaking, I guess there may be times where you may say to yourself, well, I cannot make any changes, and so I'm going to go and meet with another group. But sometimes I wonder how many problems might have been resolved scripturally had some decided to stay present and push to work through it. I mean, it's more of an opinion on my part, but any thoughts? All right, Paul's rolled on in now. No, you're fine. It looked kind of neat seeing you just kind of drift in there. So we have a comment coming in from the chat room, Jerry. And this goes back to our, what you call jib-jab discussion earlier. But we're talking about Matthew chapter 6 and the prayer that Jesus used in teaching his disciples how to pray. Jerry says, could it be said that Matthew 6 prayer could be interpreted or understood as the spirit of the law versus letter of the law? I know. That's an interesting point. Any thoughts about that?
I mean, and I guess what I would see in that, I think he's more dealing with the spirit of the law, which is the point to drive home. Matter of fact, the entire Sermon on the Mount is contrasting the spirit of the law with the letter of the law. And so that's, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, I think after Jesus' introductory remarks, that's the title of his lesson.
Well, how many times did he say, you have heard it said, but I say to you? And he's really not changing what the law taught. He's better explaining what the law taught and what their misunderstanding was.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So in giving us that model prayer, he's giving us, and that goes what we're talking about here. It's a model, not something to be quoted rote or whatever the word is, liturgically, and without potentially without thought. And I say that because, I know that there are people out there that pray the quote unquote Lord's Prayer and they genuinely mean it as they pray it, but it is something that lends toward becoming nothing but, if you want to use the term, Jesus did in that very text, vain repetition. I mean, it can become that. As a matter of fact,
the Pharisees.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, I think today I would have to modify the wording, especially in dealing with the kingdom. I'd have to modify the wording if I were to utter that prayer. So. Yeah.
Because his kingdom has come.
Exactly.
And in that respect, his will has been done.
Yeah, exactly. Or interpret your kingdom come in a different way. Right. I mean, may your kingdom come spiritually as I'm teaching others or as others hear your word and those types of things, but not in the way that it's meant. And the way Jesus meant it, because when he prayed it, Acts 2 had not happened yet, or when he taught it.
Yeah.
Right. Or
Jerry says,
the
go ahead.
realization of the kingdom. Yeah, the realization of the kingdom, because it's here, but you can't fully see it until it's realized. And every knee's going to bow. That's a good point. I always go back to Matthew 5. When you're looking at the Sermon on the Mount, who is Jesus talking to? Well, he sits down and he says his disciples came to him, and he's speaking to his disciples. So everything in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is talking about those who are disciples of Christ. Those are the ones who are going to be blessed. Those are the ones who are going to pray in this way. You have to be a disciple of Christ and a follower of him. I think that's an important note to, who is he talking to? Who's the audience?
Yeah.
And if you want all these things, if you want to be able to pray this way, we got to follow Christ.
Yeah. These people had been taught by religious leaders who had mistaught them. And just like he had compassion on them as a sheep without a shepherd, these people were without true teachers. Yeah. Jerry, he makes an interesting point. Let me bring this up here. He says Jesus is giving principles or principles. And I would go with the former principle because I think, the second principle, principals, is from Latin, which means friends of the prince. And so the principal of a school comes from those who are pals of the prince of the school. Now, I've made that all up, but it sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Anyway. But I like what Chris goes on to say. I know someone who says, your kingdom grow. And that's, that expresses we're now on this side of the establishment of the kingdom. And this is what our prayer is, that it continues. And it was also the prayers of the apostles in different ways. And then James says we are one breath away from our eternity, so we need to always be ready. That's true. It's a good point. All right, any other thoughts?
Not verses 25 and 26. Are we there yet?
You know what? There is one more point that I want to make real quick. Notice here, let me bring it up on the screen. There in verse 23, where he says that they may be made perfect in one, and that the world may know that you have sent me and have loved them as you also have loved me. He said the same thing earlier. By this they will know that you are my disciples, that you love one another. You know, and just kind of another way the world knows that Jesus was and is who he says he was and who he truly was, because of the love of the Father for him, his love for the Father, and of course our love for one another.
Right, yeah,
but go ahead, Tom.
And that was John 13, 34 and 35. So, and I mentioned that because John 13 through John 7 or John 16 are all the same occasion, and this prayer is that same day. So, from that standpoint. But having said that, as we wrap this prayer up that Jesus makes here, in the verse 24, I desire that they also whom you gave me may be with me where I am. He's gone to prepare a place for him, which he talked about in the same sermon. And then he makes the point there that the world has not known you, but I have known you, and these have known that you sent me. And I have declared to them your name, and will declare it, that the love with which you love me may be in them and I in them. As Jesus wraps up this prayer as it is recorded here, he makes the observation that the world is rejecting me. Many in the world are rejecting me, but these disciples have not. We sometimes, when we examine the lives of the apostles, we notice their flaws. And I think there's lessons to be made in that, how they didn't get what Jesus was saying because there was just something there to keep them at that moment from fully grasping what he was emphasizing. But one thing that they got early on is who Jesus was. That is, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Yeah. And they got that very early on. And Jesus is making the point. The world is rejecting me. Some of these Jewish religious leaders, corrupt religious leaders, are rejecting me. These have not rejected me. And they know that you are the one that sent me. And what I've declared to them, they're going to declare, I think, is basically the point that he is making. And so he picked the right ones.
Yeah, I agree. All right, any thoughts? Paul or Caleb? Okay. All right, let's see. Let's continue forward now on into chapter 18. So we're getting ready to have a scene shift, if you would, in some ways. Jesus and his disciples, they're going to leave from where they currently are, and we're getting ready to enter into his arrest. And the betrayal there, well, the betrayal by Judas has already begun, of course, but kind of the fulfillment of that betrayal. Let's start in verse 18, and Mr. Tom, let's read down through verse 11. Let's kind of grab this
John
first
18,
chunk here.
John 18, beginning in verse number 1. We read there, when Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. And Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. Then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, whom are you seeking? They answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said to them, I am he. And Judas, who betrayed him, also stood with them. Now, when he said to them, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. Then he asked them again, whom are you seeking? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I have told you that I am he. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way, that the saying might be fulfilled which he spoke, Of those whom you gave me, I have lost none. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servants and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, put your sword into your sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me?
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Tom. All right, let's back up there to verse 1. We have the setting here. They go over the brook Kidron and to the garden that was there. And of course, Judas, he is now has set up the betrayal process here, or where he would bring about the arrest of Jesus there. And it's interesting, Tom, when you look at who all came with him for this. Came with Judas, that is. You've got the detachment of troops. You have, officers from the chief priests and Pharisees. So basically, you kind of, I'm assuming, no, I'm not going to assume. Do you think there were Roman soldiers as part of this detachment of troops? Or do you think they were all primarily Jewish soldiers being sent from the temple and the council?
In this case, I think this is the temple guard.
Temple guard.
I think, if you study Jewish history and so on, there are so many things that are illegal about what's going on in this whole process here. I don't think the Romans have been brought into it yet. Now, were there Roman soldiers watching the temple guard to see if they behave themselves? That could be another story. But this is the Jews taking Jesus into custody. Yeah. And what I do find interesting about this, you made the point that you have this detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees. By the way, it identifies them there. And you've got this large group of individuals, and I find it interesting that they've got weapons and all these things, and they come to Jesus. It's almost like they're expecting a confrontation. They're expecting that there's going to be a war, or that there's going to be a battle on this particular occasion as they try to take Jesus into custody. But then when they're looking for Jesus and he identifies himself, it says they drew back and fell on the ground. It's almost like it wasn't what they were expecting from that standpoint.
Okay. All right. Any thoughts, Paul?
You're muted.
Sorry. No, I was having to deal with an issue here that I was struggling with, so I'm sorry. It wasn't that I wasn't listening. I was reading along with Tom, and then I got distracted here.
Well, that's all right. That happens a lot.
Certainly, this is a situation where I'm sure it's been observed that they had lots of opportunities to get Jesus, and here they're acting shocked at oh, I'm Jesus of Nazareth. They fall back. It's all a big act. I know that Mark's account, for instance, adds and gives us a description, probably along with Luke, that that Judas comes up and betrays him with the kiss to identify Jesus. But there was also evidently a conversation here that took place. But Jesus says that he's Jesus of Nazareth, but then also Judas identifies him as, since he is the betrayer, he identifies him as well. And so it's one of those situations. There's two situations here, that and the situation with Malchus, that we see good examples of how you need to take all that the scripture says about a certain matter, and that you kind of need to harmonize here what the different gospel accounts say, so that you can get the whole picture of all that takes place. One passage only says it was the servant of the high priest, and Here, John gives great detail, but if you take each passage and you read it, you understand sort of the whole picture of what happened there. Although I do believe that all four gospel accounts stand on their own, that you could just read them and get the picture, but you get details filled in, and we love our details.
That's true. That's true. I wonder if maybe, so they intentionally go by night, okay? But normally, I shouldn't say normally, the majority of the time, let's say it that way, Jesus was always surrounded by a lot of people. And now the way that the text reads, it was going to be just basically the 11. I say the 11 because Judas, well, I guess he would be surrounded by Judas. I guess all 12 would be present at this. But so do you think in verse where he says, now when he said, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. Do you think this was more of an act on their part? Or do you think it was an involuntary response to when he said he was who he was?
If I can interject something here, and it's tied to what you're talking about.
Okay, go ahead.
Jerry made a couple of more comments. First of all, he identified the two words for principle as a distinction. For what that's worth. But the other thing is he made the point in the New American Standard 95. For verse 3, it says there, Judas, then having received the Roman cohort and officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. So the New American Standard reads it as if it's the Roman cohort. And I just did a quick search, and the Greek word that is used there is found 7 times in the New Testament, and every other time it is clearly a reference to the Roman army. So I assume it is possible, and I could be wrong. When it talks about Judas having received a detachment of troops, that maybe they did go to the Romans and they got soldiers along with the temple guard who would go with them.
Well, you take notice, Tom, when you look in the New American Standard Version, they do italicize the term Roman, which typically means it's added by the translators for thought, finish the thought there. So you'd have to pull from the meaning of the word cohort,
Yeah, that's true, but the word cohort is used 7 times, and all the 6 other times it is clearly the Roman army.
I got what you're saying.
Which would lean toward the possibility or the probability that there was some Roman soldiers with them at this time. And again, I don't think that's guaranteed because this is the one thing that's not debated here is this is the work of the corrupt religious Jewish leaders. They're the ones who are behind this whole thing. And incidentally, and like I said, the reason I think that discussion factors into the fact that they drew back and fell to the ground. If these were Roman soldiers, they would not have been as familiar with Jesus and his teachings as the Pharisees would have been, the religious leaders. In other words, I mean, when we look at what's going to happen and the trumped up charges that are going to be made, this farce of a trial, they change the charge when they go to the Romans. Suppose that they had gone to the Romans and they had described who Jesus was to them early on. Oh, this guy, he's leading a rebellion against Rome, and he's got some of his group with him, and so they bring this cohort with them. And by the way, the definition of a cohort was a tenth of a legion, which would be 600 soldiers. Now, I don't think there's a full detachment, but if they came prepared for war and they were not familiar with who Jesus was, and Jesus just walks up to him and said, "I'm him," your natural response, this is this evil rebel. This is this person that wants to overthrow Rome, and he's leading this insurrection against Rome. they immediately step back or they fall back on themselves. So I see it as something that could have happened naturally if it maybe makes more sense if it was the Romans not knowing as much
Yeah.
about Jesus as the Jews.
If the detachment of troops were Roman soldiers, then we might say the officers from the chief
Yeah.
priests, Pharisees could be the temple soldiers themselves,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah. Caleb, you had a thought.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, there's a lot of people. I've always taken it as they're amazed at Jesus' glory there, and they fall back on themselves. And this is more of a willing sacrifice that Jesus doesn't have to go with them. You know, he has the power to walk away. We've seen it before, and he's going to tell Peter, you know, we're not going to fight today. This is how it's going to go down. But I've always taken it as, you know, that them falling on their face is them seeing his glory, and this is going to be voluntary.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You know, it's almost like Jesus says, "I am He," puts his hands out. You know,
Yeah.
go ahead and take me. You know, I mean, he's not resisting.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Paul, do you have anything you want to add to that? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and continue forward. So we come back to verse 8 then. He says, I've told you that I'm he, therefore if you seek me, let these go their way. If you'll notice there, you probably have a footnote in your Bibles in regards to the statement. So it might be fulfilled, which he spoke of those whom you gave me, I have lost none. And your footnote probably points you in John 6:39. I'm curious by this. This is the will of the Father who sent me, that of all he has given me, I should lose nothing, but should raise it up at the last day. That may be, or at least what commentaries or scholars think that's the reference that he's talking about there. Any thoughts about that before we look at sword yielding Peter?
You know, of interest is if that's the case, it's not an Old Testament quote.
Right.
He's just referencing something that Jesus had taught before, and that makes me wonder. And again, I don't know. I mean, because it's two quotes from John. It's two quotes from John that are given as a reference to me. John 6:39, 17, 12. There's I haven't looked at the Treasury of Scripture Knowledge, which gives you the more detailed concordance,
Right.
if you will. But I wonder if one of the other Gospels talked about it, or other writings that they had available, because I think it's pretty clear that John is the last of the four Gospels. I think external evidence of that, dating of that, I think all of that factors in. John is a supplemental gospel to the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, as we describe them.
Right.
And he fills in details. He fills in details here that fill in gaps that the other gospels don't mention. I mean, Mark or Luke mentions Jesus heals the ear, but John identifies the soldier or the one that had his ear cut off, even by name. So,
on a side note, Paul, didn't he, in one of his statements, and I can't remember, maybe it's his letter to Timothy, he references, doesn't the scripture or the scriptures teach, and what he says is actually something taught by Christ himself.
He gives. What was it? It was. I think it's one of the "You shall muzzle the ox," and which is the Old Testament. He gives two quotes.
Yeah.
One's an Old Testament and one's a New Testament. It is more blessed to give than receive.
Might be. Yeah.
Which incidentally is not recorded in the Gospels.
Yeah. All right, let's see. We do have a comment real quick from David. Let me bring it in. David says, someone missed this a while ago, Tom. The Roman soldiers knew Jesus because of the kiss. And that's a good point, too. That's a good point. But by identification, Judas kissed Jesus. That would have told them who their criminal was. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, John doesn't mention a kiss.
No.
He's filling in details. He's filling in details that were already available.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Any other thoughts? I've got one more thing to add, but it's really way off target. But any other thoughts on this?
Well, I was gonna maybe it's off topic, John. But how many people are with Jesus? Because isn't Mark mentioned, or at least we think Mark is mentioned in the garden? You know, is there other people there besides just the 12 disciples?
Oh, there would have to be, because they think the one that ran off with they grabbed hold of his outer garment
Yeah,
and he ran off without it. They believe that to be Mark.
right.
So there could have been more disciples, not just the apostles, but disciples as well.
Of course, is he following the 600 men coming out there to arrest Jesus, or 600? I mean, that's a big group.
Oh yeah,
And,
that'd be a
and
big
I,
group today.
I did want to point out, yeah, when we think about the location of the garden, you know, you can see these torches coming down towards the garden that whole time. Jesus knows they're coming. Of course, in John, you skip over the prayer. We're skipping over the disciples praying and Jesus out there praying. But, you know, you could see all these people coming. He knows it's about to happen. And the hour is coming when all these people are going to show up. So this isn't like a surprise to any of them that this large group has been, you know, torching their way out there. You could see them coming. But yeah, I don't know how many people were with Jesus besides the 12 disciples, but they were ready for the riot. You know, however many people Jesus had out there, they're ready to take them by force.
Yeah. Let me see if I can get a picture brought up here real quick. Bear with me just a second here. Go ahead. Do you have any other thoughts? Go ahead while I work on this.
Well, I think I've seen pictures from other preachers. They go over there, you know, you stand on the mountain, you can see the entire hill, and you can see how they would come down into the garden over the brook of the Kidron. So they can see all these things, you know, as it's happening. And, you know, we kind of lose that with our geography and not being there. That maybe there's some more evidence, you know, to say, you know, what's happening.
Y'all won't be able to see this. Well, you might be able to on the small thumbnail of me. This is a landscape, a model of the city of Jerusalem from, I can't remember if it was the time of Christ or the time of David. I'm going to say it's David because it was at David exhibit that they had at a local place here. And so if they're coming down, and I'm not sure where the Brook Kidron would be, somewhere maybe, you know, but anyway, the point that one of y'all made is that you got 600 soldiers coming with lanterns and torches. You're going to see them coming from a distance. You know, just the sheer shape of the landscape here. Interesting. Okay. All right.
They say that river, that brook carries the blood of the sacrifices down it. I don't know if you guys have read that before.
I don't know.
It's, you know, symbolic there that some people think of his blood that he's going to shed.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of foreshadowing Christ's death.
That's interesting.
That might be reading too much into it. I don't know.
All right. So the one more thought that I had on this is in talking about what the gospel accounts record and what they don't record, is Mark does not tell about Peter's instance where he walked on the water and then sank due to his lack of faith. I've often thought that was interesting. That maybe that was not something Peter really promoted as the best time of his life, you know, assuming Mark learned what he did from Peter. Yeah.
Yeah. There's little interesting elements about all the Gospels. Those types of little details. What's said and what is not said. What Gospel records what.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's always why in the Gospel of John we set it apart. Or, I mean, it's the Gospel, but we call it a supplement because I think it's like 95% of what's in the Gospel of John is unique to the Gospel of John.
You know, this may be the image I brought up a while ago based on a map that I'm looking at. This might be the Brook Kidron. as far as the way they've got it reflected here in this illustration.
Yeah.
And so just again, come back to this idea of watching 600 soldiers. If the full detachment came out, they didn't catch him off guard. He knew what was happening. Yeah, that's interesting. All right.
Because if it was anybody else, you hey, we're getting out of here. We're
Yeah.
going. We're gonna go somewhere else because they're coming. If this
Yeah.
was a real rebellion, and it just
And then
goes to show you that Jesus went willingly.
Yeah, that's right. Well, how many times had he said, "My hour's not yet come"? Don't tell others what you've seen and heard. But then it shifts to where my hour has come. And this is what is supposed to happen. And that's why he rebuked Peter. Peter, he takes a sword out, he strikes the servant's ear, and Jesus says, "Put your sword into the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me to drink?" This was going to be what was supposed to happen, and it could not be prevented, and was not to be prevented. Yeah. All right, any thoughts or comments?
And incidentally, that would probably be a little bit that's tied to what Jesus makes the request, let these go.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
could you see somebody drawing a sword and cutting somebody's ear off, and then them saying, okay, go ahead and go. And by the way, when I mention that, what John doesn't mention is what Luke mentions, and it's in Luke's account, where Jesus heals his ear.
Yes.
So he puts it back in place, and I kind of I think it'd be interesting. We don't know the answer to this, but think about that servant of the high priest Malchus. After these events take place, I wonder what's going through the mind of Malchus as Jesus has touched his ear and healed him on the occasion when he's being taken into custody. It would be interesting to know what happened to Malchus after this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm talking about.
I think it's
Yeah.
when you look at the fact that it brings him up by name. John's filling in blanks for us.
Yeah.
He's like, it was Malchus. Everybody knows who Malchus is, I'm sure. At this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. He can name him by name, and you know who it is.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, and by the way, that's just one of those details that points to the historicity of these texts, because this is the only time in all the Bible that Malchus is mentioned, as far as I know. So you've got that. And the question: did he become a believer?
The fact that John mentions him to this level maybe suggests that people would know who he was.
Yeah.
These things are written so that you might believe. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, and another apologetics argument based on that is the fact that he mentions him by name shows that as he's writing this letter, it's safe for him to mention him by name.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm talking about the
that's a good
hostility of
point, too.
Christianity. From that standpoint, that goes back to Mark, the disciple fleeing, not mentioned by name. John does not mention himself by name as the writer of this letter. And you've got several instances of that in the Gospels where it depends on who the writer is. He doesn't mention specific individuals by name, and that kind of lends toward we can kind of figure out who it is or have a good a good guess, a good educated guess as to who it is, because they're not mentioned. It wasn't safe to mention them by name. When Luke talked about it and Jesus healed his ear, it would not have been safe when Luke wrote it to actually mention it. John can mention it because it's 20 years later, 30 years
I've never
later.
thought of it that way, Tom, where it's for safety. I always took it as a humble thing from the writers. They don't mention themselves or the things it's not about them. It's about Christ.
Yeah.
That's a good point too, that maybe that is something else.
And I think the humility factors in too.
Yeah.
I think it does. But a lot of that, but there's a lot of powerful evidence things, behind the scenes things about the Gospels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good points on that. Good points. A couple quick comments real quick. We have one from David Cambridge. He says, I wonder how many disciples had weapons apart from Peter. It's a good question. Going out at dark, there might be animals and so forth they might have to defend themselves against. Maybe others had it as well. And we've got this oddball in the chat room by the name of Brian. I don't know why he's not with us. Anyway, Brian says,
Maybe we
did
ought
we
to strike his comments. You got to watch.
Yeah.
Did we discuss them falling to the ground when he said, I am he? We did talk about that a little bit. And Brian makes a point that Luke says, I think Luke says, well, there's a conversation where Jesus says, when you're sitting out he said, before when I sent you out, I told you not to take anything, but now you can take a sword. And one of them says, we have two. And didn't Jesus say that's sufficient?
Brian lists the verse.
Well,
Luke
if I
22,
read his
28.
next comment, that'd be beneficial,
Next
wouldn't
comment, he mentions
Yeah.
the verse. And
Luke 20.
this is around the same time. This
a
is
good
around the same time. I mean, it leads into going to Gethsemane.
it? Yeah. Lord,
In
look,
Luke-
here are two swords. He says it's enough. Yeah. Okay. All righty. Any other thoughts or comments about that?
Yeah. Who else had the sword? I guess is the question. We don't know. It doesn't say.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
is it
other
like
question you can ask God. Like what? Who has the other sword? Because
Like the Holy Grail. Where's that at? Anyway.
yeah.
Well, let's plan to pull the study to a close. It's right at the top of the hour, actually 12:03. Let's plan next week to pick up with our study in John chapter 18 this time. We'll pick up in verse 12 and continue forward with his arrest and moving on through the trial here. All right, any other thoughts or comments? Once again, if you'd like to contact us, you can send an email to us, send it to questions@truthfactorlive.com, or email us individually, as you see on the screen there. I don't have one set up for Caleb just yet, so we'll get one set up for him and add him to the mighty list. And that way you can tell him what you think about what he had to say during today's study. But anyway, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us for our study today. Lord willing, we'll continue this next week. After next week, I think the following Thursday I'll be away, but I'll let you know for sure about that. But next Thursday, 11 o'clock a.m. Central Time, we'll continue through our study of John, picking up in chapter 18 there in verse 12. All righty, thanks everyone, and we'll see you all next week. Have a good one.